and still support my team. So that's it for me, Robert.
I'm on mute. There's the other big thing that happens during these type of calls. Pilot Air. Altair, one of the big companies in our space, in the mobility space, that helps support people to make sure that they, not just their own people, but then clients to make sure that they can work from anywhere, for sure. And Sela, I never pronounce your name right. Sela, could tell us how to pronounce your name first, and then a little more background. Sorry about that.
Yes, no worries. So my name is Seal Lucas. I'm with Hewlett Packard Enterprise, and I'm the Global Culture and Team Member Experience Lead for HPE. And I run all of the culture and engagement programs for our company. I have a very small team. And everything that we do is to support all 60,000 employees. So we've just since the pandemic have moved to a different work model, which we're calling Edge to Office. We have about 80% of our employees that are Edge, which are the work from anywhere employees, with the expectation that they should come into the office 1 to 2 days a week. Then we have our office employees, which is about 10% of our head count, and the remainder are full-time teleworkers, which don't come into the office at all. I've been with HPE for about 24 years in various roles. So now I'm in corporate HR. And as far as my craziest place, I'm a big, I love to go to Yellowstone. So I was having to take a conference call while we were driving through the park, and I was watching bear and bison run around while I was on a conference call. So that's a little bit about me.
That's fantastic. Okay, I'm going to say that right from now on, Seal. Just a little bit about me, Robert Horsley. I work on the leadership team of a law firm or immigration firm called Fragaman. We are a firm that kind of has offices all around the world and help facilitate the fact that people have the right to work wherever they are working. So we are square smack in the center of helping people figure this out. And I've gotten to meet great people like our panelists doing jobs like this. I've sat on committees and boards, and in fact, to the people in your room today, I've sat on boards with to help guide this industry a little bit. So very meaningful to me, and really excited that we can start getting people excited about this industry before you even get into the industry and figure out that this is a great place to be. Craziest place. So I'll give you three. I raised 3 boys and coached their baseball team. So I worked from anywhere at the third base coaching box quite frequently and took client calls from there. It's good to be transparent with your work colleagues of where you're at the time. I'd taken a board meeting call from the castle at Disneyland. I was the freak there in the corner trying to keep quiet and talk. And I was also at the top of one of the Alps in France. Because it had the best reception. So I've taken great advantage of work from anywhere before it was a thing. So let's talk a little bit about that. And again, really excited to be with you guys today and looking forward to the portion where we can take your questions a little bit more. I think we all talk about this a lot and have a fairly good understanding of it, but just want to share it. So my first question is, what do you think work from anywhere means? Because I don't know that any of us would describe it in the same way. So, let's just open-ended. What do you think it means, Susan?
Yeah, that's a great kickoff, and something I've given some thought to. I tried to think about, what does that mean? So for me, it's that I do have a home base, right? I have a place where my company's legal structure, their compliance structure is adhered to. So whatever that means for every organization is a little bit different based upon their footprint. So I wouldn't be a financial services compliance person if I didn't kind of put that framework up. But as long as I have that home base and I'm still I get that flexibility to work. As long as I'm delivering my results and I'm meeting my objectives, and I'm not only meeting those for me, but for the greater organization, for my team members, right? Then for me, that means that I'm able to work from anywhere, and I should be able to be available during core business hours. And if that means, like I said, visiting my dad, or, as Eric said, maybe he's doing a little pleasure and he's, maybe on a business trip, and then he's extending that to take care of some personal wants and needs. As long as I'm in compliance from a corporate perspective, and I'm delivering results, to me, that's what work from anywhere means. That it gives me the flexibility to really have that meld of personal and professional existence.
Do you think, Susan, that people that manage the people that are working from anywhere appreciate those things you just said? The ability to get the core of what you're doing, mix kind of a little personal into that, but still get everything you're needing to get done? Or do you think there's some skepticism about productivity and a little bit of resentment?
I don't know that I would say there's resentment. I would imagine, and I'm a leader, and I mentioned earlier that during COVID was a scary time, right? Potentially up to 300 people, making sure that we're able to deliver on commitments every day to some of the largest corporate clients in the globe. And it really comes down to trust. And as a team forms and they understand each other's commitments and really the synergy of what I do and how everybody else depends upon me, as long as I'm accountable to that and I've delivered consistently, I don't think that there is any challenge. I mean, and I look at my team members, I trust them to get the work done. And as long as we're getting that done in the structure that doesn't put anybody else in a difficult position, then it seems to work for us here.
Steele, one of the things that I love that you've described is the edge worker, right? I mean, I think that is such a good framing of what that means. So the work from anywhere probably means a little bit something different for them than your teleworkers. But do they all have different expectations, or does everybody want to be a teleworker? Tell me a little bit of what you think work from anywhere means.
Sure. So, much to what you were saying earlier, Robert, I've been working from anywhere pretty much my entire career. I was hired as a teleworker way before it was cool to do it, way before the pandemic forced pretty much every industry to do it. But for me, what I think for our edge workers is, it's probably a hybrid approach for them. I think a lot of them really enjoy the flexibility. But when they have those moments when they're in the office, they really take advantage of the opportunity to connect with their colleagues. And for us at HPE, we've repurposed our site. So a lot of our sites have been redesigned and our footprint is a lot smaller. So we don't have these big, huge offices where everybody goes to work every day. Is purposeful when you go in. So our offices now are more considered collaboration and culture hubs. So you go there for a specific reason when you're an edge worker, whether it's to go in for a meeting or whether it's to go in for cultural events or whether it's to go in for, fun social events. There's a reason why you're going there and not just going there for heads down work. So for me, work from anywhere means the ability to contribute and succeed no matter where you're located. And, Susan mentioned it earlier, that trust is super important for leaders to have for their employees to be in this new flexible work environment.
So I think some people that don't, maybe have a different definition start thinking of, well, I'll work in the Bay Area today, but I'm going to go to Texas on Wednesday. I'll start working there. In fact, maybe that's what I'm doing. Then I'll work in Texas, and then I'll hop over to New York, and then I'm going to hop over to Germany next week, and I'm just going to kind of move around. Is that what work anywhere is?
Well, I think it really depends on the company. So, our company has really based it on, you have the flexibility, but there is that expectation that if you're an edge worker, that you're located near one of our sites. So while you have the flexibility to work from anywhere, for instance, I have an elderly father as well, so I have to go there once a month and spend a week there to take care of him. And this flexibility provides me that opportunity. But they were very intentional that it didn't mean that you could just pick up and move to the beach, or you could go spend 6 months at the beach as an edge worker. That is more telework if you want to be completely separated from the office. So I think that there's a mixed approach on what that means for various employees from an edge perspective.
So Eric, I think you already answered this question kind of right from the beginning. Then it's, you work every day, you work all the time, you work kind of from anywhere. But you talked a little bit about your startup DNA. Are there certain types of people where this works for? Are there certain types of companies? I imagine when you're first starting out, it's really helpful to be together. Is there a point where it makes more sense where you can start to be apart, or am I imagining that? And are there certain types of people does this work for? Do you need to pick a certain type of person that can pull this off?
So I think part of the way I'll answer this is building. So I thought Susan absolutely nailed it in terms of what I call the guardrails of work from anywhere, which is work from anywhere kind of within this structure. Same thing with Seal. And within a small company, the creativity piece is pretty tough to get going. And I think the way that you should potentially look at it is, if you're new to the workforce, right? What are you looking for from a career perspective? What are you looking for from a learning perspective? And that starts to guide a lot of what anywhere means. Because I look at it differently if I'm transitioning roles or starting a new company with people I've already worked with before, right? A lot of those conversations can be had anyway, kind of any which way. But whenever I've done something entirely new, it's always really started with a small amount of people in a small space, quite frankly. And so I think that's a little bit of the last piece I'll add to that anywhere part, which is making sure kind of the goals of the person entering the workforce matches that definition of anywhere, because there is a lot of benefit to it, and from a recruiting basis, from a cost of living basis, but that's got to be matched with, am I actually going to have my career goals met, and am I going to learn?
I actually think there's a lot of we've watched employment change over the last 100 years or whatever. It used to be that the employer kind of took care of you for life, right? And you took care of them, they took care of you. And over the last 100 years, it's become more and more, it looks more and more like a gig worker, no matter if it's an Uber driver in the purest sense of gig working, all the way to however you're employed by somebody, you're taking more personal responsibility for maybe your retirement, or building a network, or I think there are lots of things. So I think there's some things that you need to be on the lookout for, that people need to be ready for. And I was just thinking about you need to be ready to take personal responsibility and even on your own journey and continuing to learn, because that may not be front and center when you're not sitting at home base, or people are thinking about what you need to continue to learn to continue your journey.
Would you say it's more, you can almost classify it into traditional consulting, kind of up and out programs where you go on site, you learn, you travel, and you kind of go up in that industry or move horizontally to another, or it's becoming more entrepreneurial, to your point of the gig, for people who are kind of starting in a work from anywhere environment, because they're given that autonomy, but they've got to take a lot more kind of responsibility to make sure they're learning the things and are able to move up in that career.
It's almost like when you're in school, right? You've got to take personal responsibility. Which classes am I going to take? There's a framework, but nobody's going to tell you which class to take what semester and what right after another. Like there may be a framework with it, but it's, there's a lot of personal responsibility. I don't know, Seal, what do you think about that?
I agree with that. And I would also add to that, not just accountability and personal responsibility, but also think about your personal brand. Like when you're not in the room, what do you want people to say and think about you, right? And that's how you show up every day, not physically how you show up, but how you're setting expectations. Are you delivering when you say you're going to deliver? Are you showing up on time? Are you joining the meetings? Are you putting in the extra effort? What are you doing to make yourself stand out? And work from anywhere, and it sounds sexy and it sounds fun, but there's a lot of nuances that come with that as well, because, and I think Susan alluded to it earlier, you're pretty much available 100% of the time, right? Or at least that's the expectation of a lot of people. If you have that flexibility, I should be able to get in touch with you and you should respond right away, no matter what time that is. I think that it's important to really think about your personal brand and how you want to show up every day, but also think about the company that you want to work for. Really look at their culture and understand, who they are as a company, and is that the right fit for you? Because you've got to figure that out as well when you're thinking about, could you even work at a place like that? And could you also work from a hybrid perspective within their own cultural boundaries?
Yeah, I think we'll get into that a little bit more. I think that's what people are wanting to hear. How should I explore where some of these places might be? Susan, I think we talked a little bit about some of the traits that people that are going to have to own on their own. Do you have any more insight into that? And then, I have these 4 C's I want to talk about a little bit, but let's jump into that.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting if I tie it back to mobility, right? There's this cultural awareness, and we use them all the time, these tools in mobility, and they often focus on getting our relocating employees, making sure that they're going to be culturally aligned if we're going to move them from one culture to another. And I think the same general focal areas apply here, right? So obviously communication, time, relationships, if it's a high tech country versus a country where how things are said versus maybe what is said, or body language, all of this is impactful in a remote environment as well, right? So as you're connecting to your team members and you're all remotely, how is communication handled? And I think that looking at your employer and yourself, right? So what is my employer doing? Is that if I'm in interviews, am I asking that employer, how do you support training? Right? Is it all going to be on me? Do I have to be an individual who can dig in and learn, fairly independently, or are you going to travel me into the office a certain amount of time for my training? So things that identify how I communicate and how independent of a worker I am, what kind of a self-starter I am, and how I adapt really become critically important. And if I'm going to be successful as a true remote worker or a work from anywhere individual. My 2 cents.
No, I think it's valuable. When I think about, one of the reasons we've always been in the office and the benefit from it, right, was, and again, I've worked from everywhere. But the benefit of it, I traveled millions of miles around the world to look people in the eyes. Was at the end of the day, what I was doing was I was visiting our office, visiting our colleagues, visiting our clients, because I wanted to look at them in the eyes and really understand them. Now I'm doing a lot less of that, thankfully, but I started thinking about what are the things that are going to break down possibly. What are the core tenets to working in a successful organization? And I bet you would agree with a lot of this, Eric. There's a need for connectivity, right? To be for the employee and the organization to be connected to mission, right? So connectivity doesn't just mean that you can dial into the office email exchange, but that you're connected with your colleagues, you're connected and aligned to mission, right? Culture was something you felt. You weren't just told what it was, but you felt what it was. You understood what not only what the company was trying to do and what the mission was, but the why, right? When I say that, the why, I think of you, Kerwin. And community. So community was something that is around the kitchen, if you will, or the snack machine or whatever it was. You naturally gravitated and met more and more people, and you built your community, and it's where you found your coaching on an informal basis. I think as we contemplate this and there's going to be a breakdown of some of this. And I liked how you said, Seal, that, you're going to go back into the office intentionally. You're going to do that to not just go put heads down and get something done, unless that's where you can do that the best, right? But you're going to do that to be in some kind of collaborative environment that will probably start to meet a lot of these needs. But I think we've got to find tools for the future that aren't the old tools to make sure that people are highly connected, to make sure that the culture is something that's deeply understood. And there's a way to have kind of a buddy to understand the path. But I think community is something different. So this is a little provocative. I think community starts to move over into personal responsibility a little bit more. And I'm certainly, a lot of my colleagues don't agree with this. I will tell you that straightforward. But I think the more you rely on your work environment for your community, the more you set yourself up for, silos. I think the people that did the better, survived a little bit more easily during the pandemic were people that had communities outside of the office, because all of a sudden overnight they were transitioned away from that community. So I think maybe that's one of the takeaways from the pandemic is, how do companies help you form your community, whatever that is? Enablement, but not responsible for it. The other three, I think organizations really have to figure out with new tools how to deliver on those. I don't know, any of you, what do you guys think about that notion and how we might start doing some of that differently?
I think one thing I'd bring up is in hiring. Oh, kid broke in. Hold on.
There's another thing, work from anywhere. It's my favorite thing about work from anywhere is you get to see what people are actually dealing with while they're working, whether it's the bear walking into the room or
I've had that. I've had two bear break-ins this year. The joys of the mountains. But no, on the community side, Robert, one of the things that I think we did a much better job of with the last company we built, which was more remote. We had employees all over the US and actually one in the UK. And what that was I focused on not hiring or focused on hiring people that had something great outside of work, kind of personally. A passion, a success, just something that gave them a lot of purpose. Because what you're talking about in a larger company, you do lose a sense of community. I've seen it just where I am today. And I have not been back to the office since March 2020 for myself. Seen people in other areas, but it's definitely been a big shift in the community aspect. But similar to in a startup where you'll have down days, lots of down days where you don't think it's going to make it. It's pretty tumultuous. Having that thing outside of work, whatever it is, could be community service, could be family, could be athletics, could be travel, could be really anything. Gets people through it in a way where work doesn't dictate how they're feeling so much. And so I think that's my thing to add on this one, which is now in a larger company, looking for those things in a hire are going to be important, especially if it's a remote work environment.
Yeah, and that's
let me ask a question a little bit differently, Seal. Maybe we can pivot a little bit, because I know we want to leave with practical examples. So maybe we take the same frame and say, okay, so what are some of the skills this group needs to kind of develop to survive in this I think it's the same question, just a little bit different. How, what are some of those skills you think they should be looking at? I think you started there, Eric.
I think those skills are really self-learning, self kind of reflection as you come into companies and really making sure and this is coming out of school, this is what you've been doing, knowing with confidence how to learn, right? And how to build skill set. And also if that skill set is long-term going to be people management, for example, though, I highly suggest you be in an environment where you can see and understand that in-person environment alongside. So if you think of what SEAL talked about with their kind of edge and culture centers, it's having an environment that's going to be more hybrid there, I think is going to be better. And then if you're very, very skills orientated and much more of kind of an individual contributor, or you kind of like just doing the work, not necessarily being on the people side, that can lean more towards a remote environment. And so I think the more you kind of self-reflect and learn kind of the skill set of how to learn in those paths, I think you'll do really, really well.
Theo, I cut you off before. How about you? What are the skills of the future?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the biggest ones is, when you think about a soft skills perspective, is communications. Like, how do you communicate with others in this remote environment? Because you have to take into consideration who you're communicating with, because there's currently 5 generations in the workplace. So how we might communicate with someone that's much older than us versus, the audience that's on the call today, the college students, that's going to look very differently. The learning is very important. You've got to have a curious mindset, diversity of thought. But I would also say one important skill is boundary setting, right? Because this work from anywhere, as I said earlier, can really scope creep into your personal life. And you've got to set boundaries so that doesn't consume your entire life. And Eric was saying something earlier that really caught my attention, is a sense of purpose. So you've got to figure out what makes you tick even outside of work and protect that space.
Yeah, Robert,
Susan, you must get asked this question all the time too, right?
Yeah, I was just going to jump in and just add that I think if I was going to advise anyone who was thinking about endeavoring into a kind of a more remote work, not even hybrid where they're in the office a little bit, but I do have several team members that are completely remote, and you've got to have really strong relationship building skills. So I would recommend to anybody who's thinking about potentially applying for a 100% remote job to ask themselves if they're an introvert, an extrovert, how comfortable they are with building relationships, because relationships are what get everything done. We like to think that all these business processes are all effective, but and everything just happens on a dime, but it doesn't. More often than not, there's a challenge that comes up every day. And each one of those challenges is solved by people reaching out, connecting, communicating. And a lot of times it's about asking for people to go above and beyond, and that only happens through the relationships you've built. So for me, I would recommend making sure that you have those skill set ready and at your hand, or are working to develop them as an individual. If you're looking at coming out of school and saying, I want to apply for a 100% remote job.
Building trust that doesn't just come naturally because you're with the person every day, right? I love that. What about when you're interviewing a company? These kids are all going to be going out, I would assume, kind of looking for jobs, and do they trust what they see on the surface? How do they start to scratch the surface seal to see what's real about what the companies that they're talking to?
Yeah, I'm a big promoter of going and reading what people write on websites like Glassdoor, or websites like that, where you hear from people that are in this work environment and hearing their opinions about this. But when you're talking and interviewing with companies, ask them what it's like to work there, and ask them to share examples of, how do they foster empowerment, innovation, flexibility? Is it a tops down environment? It is a bottoms up environment? Is there a happy medium in the middle between tops down and bottoms up? What do people enjoy the most about working at their companies? A lot of times when you interview, people ask you for references, but I think it's just as important to flip the table and ask for references for people that work in the company that you can speak with, because there's nothing like getting the real truth from people that are actually there. So you're not being sold on something that may not be reality when you're interviewing for jobs. And one thing that I do specifically want to call out, this, remote work, while it's important to keep all companies moving forward, we're social beings, right? And we've got to have that emotional and social connection with each other, because it drives not just innovation and business, but it drives purpose for us personally and keeps us motivated to keep doing our best. So you've got to figure out what works for you from a connection perspective and make sure to double down on that.
Do you have a secret question you would suggest people ask, Susan?
Yeah, I think the biggest question for me, if I were, and I haven't interviewed for a job in about 8 to 10 years now, but I would definitely want to ask what investments the company is making in bringing collaboration and communication to the forefront. To Seal's point, I want to understand what collaboration tools they're using. I want to understand, the space, the workspace, if you could potentially even get a tour to see what that is practically, because I don't know about the rest of you, but if you've been in hybrid meetings and, some people are in the room and some people are dialing in, and, having the skill set and having the tools to be able to collaborate, the online whiteboards, having the project management software that keeps people connected, and all of that's really important. So I would ask a lot of questions about that innovation and the tools that they use to move forward.
That's a great one. And I'll throw in a skill of just understanding project management, how to get things done. You're going to take more personal responsibility for getting things done. I think you need to understand a little bit more about that. Last question for you, Eric, a little bit different perspective. You built companies with culture, and then you've sold those companies with that culture. I know you're a great believer in doing the right thing for the company you've grown and the employees that help you do that. How do you know that about the company you're going to sell to? How do you know if they're going to continue that culture on, so you're not just dumping your employees in something bad?
Yeah, in all cases, really talking to the executive management and seeing what their culture themselves is, like how they represent it. You have to see that alignment, and I think part of it is how you work, how you communicate. If you get into product management, for example, I've never seen two companies that do product management the same, because it's a reflection of the people in the organization. Someone like Google's very engineering first. Someone like Apple's very design first. Apple's very, very waterfall and kind of structured, and Google's very autonomous at the edges and kind of bottoms up. And so that would be my kind of approach coming in, which is just to really understand how they work, and does that align to how you like to work? Because if it doesn't, it ends, to your point, really badly and really quickly.
So just in summary, like, I think there's great opportunity and the ability to work anywhere. It gives you all kinds of opportunity for opportunities. But to arrive at being that person that can succeed in that, you need to know yourself, right? And what makes you tick, put yourself in an environment that aligns with that, and know enough about organizations, know enough about communication skills, getting things done skills, and building relationships outside of what used to be the norm, because the norm is going to be different in the future. I don't know, Michelle, I think we landed this plane a little bit. I know you wanted to allow some time for questions. I hope we've done that. Obviously, these three have a lot to be able to share, so I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Robert. So I just want to give a personal thanks for all of you guys for attending this event. We'll go ahead and move into our Q&A portion of this event. So we will start by answering a question from, oh no, I'm going to butcher this name, Agnieszka Skuza. So she has a personal question for Seal. Can you share a few examples of cultural events? And what is the role of those events in your company? So maybe we can start by answering the first question, which is a few example of cultural events.
Sure. Yeah, this is something I'm very, very passionate and excited about. So we have quite a few. So I'll call out the three biggest ones that we have. One is called Team Member Appreciation Day, which is the day that we set aside every year to show appreciation for our employees. And we pull together virtual events, site events, depending on whether people are hybrid or edge employees or whether they're site employees. And it's really a day of celebration of them to make them feel special. There is another event that we're actually having this week for the very first time called We Are HPE Day, which is all about the celebration of our culture and who we are collectively as a company. And we chose the month of November because this is the month that we separated from HP Inc. We separated into two different companies in 2015. And then we have two innovation cultural programs that we run every year. One is called Escape the Red Tape, which is a contest that we've put in place where employees can submit ideas to reduce bureaucracy. And then the other one is called Innovation Quest, which is also a contest where we crowdsource ideas from our employees to solve some of our customers' top challenges. So we really tie these programs to our business strategy too.
I hope that answers your question. I will not take the risk of butchering your name again. So I'll ask you the second question, which is, what is the role of those events in your company? I feel like you kind of answered it a little already.
Yeah, so Team Member Appreciation Day is all about celebrating our people. We Are HPE Day is all about celebrating who we are as a company. And then Escape the Red Tape and Innovation Quest is all about getting people to really focus on the innovation and ideas that drive our company forward and aligning those ideas to our business strategy.
Thank you, Seal. We'll go ahead and move to our next question, which is from Claire. And she asked, do you think there are different expectations amongst group of employees? And how do you use WFA to attract and retain talent, yet balance the needs of the business? She also has a second part to that question. We'll start with the first part. You need me to repeat?
Oh, is it for anybody?
Yes,
Okay.
This is a freebie.
From a recruiting and existing talent lens, I mean, I can speak to just what I've seen, and the balance is tough to have unless it's pretty much organizationally wide, meaning if you have a part of an organization that's able to do it and another part of the organization that isn't, you tend to have a lot of imbalance and silos kind of occurring within that. And so I think that's the best way to kind of manage it. And at a small scale, I saw that at Urbandor, where I kind of had to make the decision, which is, are we one small company in San Francisco, or do we have employees everywhere? Because we can't you can't pretend to be either. You have to be both. And then on the large company perspective, I've seen it at Airbnb, which has a global work from anywhere policy, where you really don't, from a recruiting perspective, end up with that imbalance. Like, people know that globally, if I recruit into the company, I have an opportunity to work from anywhere. So I think consistency and across everyone is the most important fact.
They also wanted to ask, and anyone could follow up after Eric, do you think that it poses new challenges for managers of global teams? And do we need to retain or reset our current practices? I feel like this is something Robert touched up on earlier too, as well.
Well, maybe I'll take it then. Absolutely. It poses new challenges. But I think they're welcome challenges. I think it's just the next evolution in how business is going to work, and it provides as many opportunities as it does challenges. I like to say that you can't build a Tesla with Buick parts, meaning you can't work the new work model with the old tools. So everybody's going to have to adapt to make this work, including, how managers will have the ability and transparency to see how people are doing, how to coach them, how to hold people accountable and to see progress. So I think that's the exciting part, is that we're going to evolve. The problem is we did it overnight. And, these things usually take, a good number of years from a change management standpoint to start. And then you kind of tweak and tweak and tweak. And eventually, 5 or 6 years later, you kind of got it right, and then all set to change again. Well, and we did probably 10 years worth of change in 2 weeks. And then people tried to adapt just how to barely make that go, and applied old models of management to this new way of working. And we're slowly working our way out of that. But hey, it's just another way of change management, what they call the Big Bang, right? And as opposed to something more iterative than probably reasonable. But I'm excited to see what comes out of it, because I think there's a lot of opportunity for how people can work and live at the same time.
Thank you, Robert.
I don't know if that answered the question.
It did, because it was asking if we should retain or reset. So you're kind of like, it's more of a strategic decision, figuring out
Reset.
Yeah. So moving on to the next question. Question number 3 we have from Leticia. And it is, what are your best tips on establishing a good team connection and visibility while working from anywhere?
So I'll take this one. I think one of the things that you've got to consider when putting a team together is truly understanding what each of their strengths are. I've always heard that you don't want to be the smartest person in the room. You want to surround yourself with everyone else that has strengths that may be your weaknesses. So I think that's one thing that will help establish a good team. The visibility, I think that's different from who the person is, in addition to the company and the culture that's in place. But it's really up to the employee to make sure that they are seen and heard, and in partnership with their leader. The leader's got to bring you along the journey, but they've got to understand, 1, what your strengths are, and 2, where it is that you want to go and what your desires are. And their goal and their job is to help you get there.
Thank you, Seal. I hope that answered the question for that attendee. So we are going to wrap it up. So maybe we'll do one more question after this one. We have a next question from an anonymous person. And that is, what is the most innovative technology that can be applied in the global mobility practices to accommodate remote work?
I think that is a great company to start.
Yeah, this is Susan Myers, and I would probably say that there's a lot of different really paths. And when it talks about the best technology, from a corporate perspective, there are great tools out there today that do kind of remote work assessment for employees who can submit to be remote workers. And so there's some great technology I know that's got integration with things like immigration and tax that provide the employee and the employer an understanding of what's the risk involved with any work from anywhere in involvement or, you know, potential opportunity for an employee. So to me, I think those tools are really important. That's just one aspect in the global mobility space that really can facilitate a strong work from anywhere environment. Robert, Seal, I'm sure, you know, Eric, you know more, but that was really one that jumped to mind for me.
Okay, I'm going to
Thank you.
trademark this one, but I'll put it out there. I think one that turns it the other way and says, here are the things we need somebody to do. Here are the things I want to do. Here's the way I want to live. And it helps you decide where that is. So it helps you decide where you'd be ideally suited to work from anywhere for the job requirement, for how you want to live. So it kind of helps filter your choices for you, for both the company and for the individual.
So I feel like there's a lot of really good questions here. If we can maybe fast track these next two questions, and we'll make these the last ones. Just your quickest answer. How do you incentivize workers to work more efficiently and keep motivated while working from home?
I think one of the big parts of a successful business is kind of managing by statistics, less about emotion and how you kind of feel about people. So it's just real clarity around kind of who's doing what and what's the product. So I think one of the things you can do in a new role is making sure that's clearly defined. What's the product I'm producing? What's the service I'm doing? And what are the metrics I'm producing that roll up to the large organization? If those aren't clear, run the other direction. And very much in a remote work environment, work from anywhere.
That's a really good that's a really good answer. Thank you so much.
Measure and compensate.
Yeah.
Oh, that too.
Pretty old fashioned, but it works.
Okay, we're going to rush this last question. And that is, what is the best way to stand out and network with managers when you're working fully remote?
Well, I think I'll jump in here really quickly and say the best way to stand out is to deliver on every commitment that you make. So if you say you're going to have something to somebody at 2 o'clock, get it to them at 2 o'clock or earlier. The more consistent you are with being a partner and delivering on your commitments, the more successful I think you're going to be. And Seal, I don't know if you have anything else you might want to add to that.
Yeah, you kind of hit the nail on the head. That personal brand, Susan just mentioned it. I mentioned it earlier. That is very, very important. And you want to stand out for the right reasons, right? Not for the bad reasons. I would also say not only delivering on the work within your own team, but also look to see, are there other areas where you can volunteer? So does your company offer gigs that have work in other functions or other teams? You know, it gives you an opportunity to network. It gives you an opportunity to learn about different parts of the company. And it's also a different way for you to stand out. Also, if there's things like resource groups. So for instance, young employee networks, Black groups, Asian American groups, all of the women's groups, all of those things, get involved in those. And a lot of those run special events and things that tie to business strategies for companies. So those are very unique ways to make yourself stand out.
I remember this from Hamilton. Listen more and talk less. Talk when it matters.
Those are some really good insights. I hope everybody, all of the fellow students, listen very carefully. I know I will be rewatching this whole event myself. Thank you, all the day 2 panelists. for attending today, and thank you for such wonderful questions. It's a shame we couldn't get through them all, but you can always tune in for us next semester. We do GMC hosts this event every semester, and make sure that everyone takes the JAM exit survey so that we can always do better every JAM week. Thank you so much, speakers and guests, facilitator, and attendees.
Thank you.